The first thing Verity Hollisway noticed as she was ushered into the long, green dining room at Ashcombe was that someone had counted the candles. Not simply lit them, as any tolerable housekeeper would have done, but counted them and, having counted, decided against half. There were 42 chairs pulled up to the great walnut table, and only 31 candles set among the silver, and the effect was of a room that had dressed for a party it did not quite believe was coming. She noted the arithmetic without meaning to, as she noted most things, and it was the sort of noticing that had made her useful in 7 households and beloved in none. She was late by 3 minutes. That was not her fault. The girl who had been sent to bring her down had lost her nerve outside the door and had wanted, in the way of frightened girls, to be told she looked well before facing the crowd. Verity had told her so, quite honestly, because the girl did look well, and had straightened her apron for her, and had climbed the last of the stairs alone. 3 minutes. In another house it would have mattered. In this house, on this night, it turned out to matter a great deal. She had been placed, she saw as she came in, at the head of the second table. That was not the head of the second table it purported to be. That was a placement designed to be seen without being honored, which was the specialty of women like Lady Marwood, who had drawn up the plan. Verity felt the room look at her, and did not permit the room to see it. She had learned that lesson at 14, in the first house she had entered as a poor relation, and had been practicing it now for 18 years. She was 32. She was, by every plain word the age preferred, a large woman, stout, broad through the shoulders and the hips, heavy in the arms, with a full round face and a soft chin, and a bust that no gown ever quite forgave. Her hair, thick and dark and dressed simply, was the best of her. Her eyes, gray and slow to move, were the second best. And if a person went about their business with the first 2 on show and the rest unhidden, one could get through most evenings without weeping. But the story does not start there, child. It starts 3 minutes earlier, in a corridor, when a boy of perhaps 7, in a coat 2 sizes too small for him and clutching a folded letter, had run smack into her hip and burst into tears, not for the collision, but for the letter, because the letter, he said, was for the Duke, and the Duke was cross and would burn it, and he had promised his sister he would put it in the Duke's own hand. Verity had knelt, because that is what she did, and had taken the letter, and had promised in her turn that it would go into the Duke's hand and no other. She had tucked it into the ribbon at her waist. She had forgotten it, in the way one forgets a thing that is only in one's care for a moment. It was still there when she sat down. The Duke of Ashcombe, whose given name was Alistair Everett Marchand, and who had been called Ashcombe for so long that his own mother had died, calling him by the title, was seated 3 chairs to her right at the head of the first table. She saw him without looking at him. That was another trick of 18 years. He was tall, even sitting, and dark, and the sort of composed that reads at first as coldness, and only later, if one is patient, as exhaustion. He was 39. He had been a widower for 4 years. His wife had been a beauty of the county, and had died of a slow lung fever in the spring of the 4th year of their marriage, and he had, in the sensible manner of a man who has been given a great deal and lost only a little of it, arranged for his household to go on precisely as before. Precisely as before was, in the practical sense, a house that had counted its candles for 4 winters. His son, Thomas, was 8 and did not speak. That was the essential fact Verity had gathered in her first afternoon at Ashcombe, 3 weeks past, before she'd been told any of it directly. She had been engaged as a temporary governess for the Duke's ward, a niece, Sophia, aged 11, and had been informed with polite indifference that the Duke's own son was not her concern, and would be found in the West schoolroom under the care of his tutor. She had gone to the West schoolroom that very evening, being a woman who checked what she was told to leave alone, and had found a boy sitting at a window with a wooden horse in his lap, and a face composed entirely of waiting. He had not looked at her. She had not spoken. She had left a book on the sill and gone away. Every day since, she had left a book. He had never taken one. He had never sent one back. The books moved, though. They were not always where she had put them. A boy who did not speak was reading, and no one in that house had noticed. She had not told anyone. She had not been sure yet what telling would cost. Now she took her seat at the head of the second table, and the footman who drew her chair did so with the flat courtesy of a servant who had been warned about her, and she folded her hands in her lap and let her eyes travel, as such eyes will, along the great crowded length of the table. And then the Duke rose. There was a stir. He was not meant to rise. The rising of a duke in his own house is a matter of protocol, and no one had scheduled it for the soup. He crossed behind the chairs of Lady Marwood and her elder son, and stopped at Verity's chair, and he said, quite plainly and not loudly, "Miss Hollisway, I believe there has been an error in the seating. You are to be at my right hand this evening. Will you come?" Not a question. It was framed as one, in the shape of one, but the punctuation was his. Verity looked up. What she saw was not a rescue. It was a face composed against a scene it had chosen to make, and did not enjoy making. She saw, beneath the composure, a jaw held too tight, and the small, hard breath of a man doing an unaccustomed thing on purpose. She saw, above all, that he had known where she was placed, and that he had waited until the room could see him unmake it. She rose. She rose with the deliberateness of a woman who has been on her feet for 18 years in other people's houses, and is not going to hurry now. Lady Marwood, whose plan the seating had been, said in the bright, airy voice she used for cutting, "Ashcombe, really, you will spoil the whole rhythm of the meal. The girl is quite comfortable where she is." "The girl," said Ashcombe in the same low, even voice, "is Miss Hollisway, and she is coming to sit at my right hand. Frederick," to his footman, "another cover." Frederick went. The room, which had not truly stopped, took a breath and pretended to have started again. Verity walked the length of the second table with her chin no higher than usual, because she never raised it in public and had no intention of learning the trick this evening. She was aware of every eye in the room, and of the way her gown, a morning gray silk she had turned twice, moved across her hips as she walked, and of the fact that she was, in the plainest observable sense, the largest woman in the room, and that no one had ever intended her to walk that walk in that room, and that she was walking it anyway. She came to the chair at the Duke's right. He drew it out himself, which was unusual. He set it in. "Thank you," she said, because that was the true thing to say. He inclined his head. "Sit." She sat. For a moment, in the confusion of an extra cover and the resumption of soup, they were islanded by the small logistics of it, and she found herself close enough to him to smell, quite plainly, that he had bathed with lavender and that his coat still carried the ghost of horse. His hand, resting on the cloth, was long-fingered and had a shallow crescent scar across the knuckle of the index finger. She noticed it because she noticed everything, and she filed it, because that is what one did with such details. He said, very low, and only to her, "I hope you will forgive the theater of it. There was not a quieter way." She had prepared, in the 3 seconds of walking, for a number of things, but not for that. Not for the low, plain apology of a man making a fool of a room to reach her, she said, before she had quite decided to, and in a murmur only he could hear. "We're bound together for 2 hours." He turned his head, 1 degree. "Are we?" 2 hours of dinner," she said, still very low. 2 hours in which you cannot rise, and I cannot leave without ruining what you have just made. 2 hours in which the room will watch every look and every silence, and try to make a story of them. So, yes, bound. And I suggest, since we are, that you tell me why. His mouth did something at the corner that was not a smile. It was the first crack in him she had ever seen. "You do not waste an hour, Miss Hollisway." "I have never had one to waste." "Now, understand, A man of his rank had not been spoken to that way at his own table in perhaps 10 years. He had been flattered, he had been managed, he had been feared, he had been carefully and expertly bored. He had not been asked, quietly, at his own elbow, what he thought he was about. And here is the thing the room did not know, and never would. He was, in that moment, relieved. He said, "The soup first. Then I will tell you. I owe you an explanation, and I do not intend to give it over consommé." Understood. They were served. She lifted her spoon. She was aware that Lady Marwood, 4 seats down and across, was watching with the fixed and terrible attentiveness of a woman revising a plan in her head. She was aware that at the far end of the second table, the seat she had vacated was being taken by a nervous cousin who had been shuffled up, and that this shuffling was itself a small, permanent rebuke. She was aware, in the way she was aware of the Count of the Candles, of Thomas, who was not there, a child of 8 did not dine, but who was somewhere in the house, and who owned at this moment a wooden horse and a great deal of silence. She thought, as she ate her soup, of the letter at her waist. The Duke ate almost nothing. She saw this without watching. He turned his soup with the spoon 3 times, and set the spoon down. She had once nursed a woman through the long dying, and she recognized the private geometry of a person who no longer trusted food to be interesting. After the soup, he leaned very slightly towards her, and the room, which had been carefully not watching, watched. He said, at a pitch only she could hear, "You have been in my house 3 weeks." "Yes, Your Grace." "You are engaged as governess to my niece." "Yes." "And yet," he said, and here his eyes went to hers for the first time properly, and she saw that they were gray and tired, and the exact gray of the sea in November when the light is going. "My son has begun to eat." She did not, at first, understand him. Then she did. She said carefully, "I have not been in the schoolroom with your son, Your Grace. I have not been given leave. I have left books." "I know what you have done." He was quiet. He was very quiet. "I know precisely what you have done. Yesterday morning he asked, for the first time in a year and 4 months, for jam. He asked, Miss Hollisway. He said the word. His nurse came to my study weeping. He said the word, and then he ate 2 pieces of bread and jam, and read a book while he ate them, and the book was one of yours." Verity looked, without meaning to, at her plate. She could feel her chest doing the thing it did when a thing she had done in the dark was suddenly held up in the light. She was not a woman who cried. She had lost the habit at 17, cleanly and forever. But she felt now the small heat behind the eyes that had once been crying, and she pushed it back. She said, "I am glad." "Miss Hollisway." "Yes." "I have not been able to make my son speak in a year and 4 months." "I know," she said gently. "His mother taught him a hymn." He said it without inflection, staring at the untouched plate before him. "She sang it when he could not sleep. She died in April of the year before last. He has not sung since. He has not asked. He has not been present. And yesterday he asked for jam." There was a silence between them that the room did not know was there. Verity said, "Would it help you to know that on Tuesday I heard him hum 4 notes of it? From the corridor. He did not know I was there." The Duke closed his eyes for the space of 1 breath. She thought, watching him, that a man who had trained for his whole life not to be seen feeling was not going to survive very long at her right hand tonight, if she was not careful with him. She said, brisker, aware of Lady Marwood, "The fish is coming. Let us look interested in the fish." He opened his eyes. "You're a strange woman." "I have been told. I did not mean it as they meant it." "I know," she said. "That is why I did not mind." The fish came. It was salmon, and it was overdressed, and the sauce was too pale. She noted these things and did not care about them, and yet she noted them, because she was who she was, Between the fish and the game, he said, still low. There is a reason I moved you. There are 2 reasons. My son is the first. The second I will not speak of over supper, but I will speak of it tonight. Will you meet me in the library at 11? Your Grace, that is not Miss Hollisway. My aunt sits 4 places down. My cousin sits 8 places down. My cousin's man of business sits at the second table where you sat. I need 1 hour of your intelligence, and I would rather not purchase it with the price of your name in the servants' hall. The library at 11. Mrs. Pargeter will be present. You will be perfectly attended. Mrs. Pargeter was the housekeeper. Mrs. Pargeter had bones like a fence post and a moral code stricter than most bishops. Mrs. Pargeter present was, in the calculus of this house, the equivalent of a chaperone made of iron. Verity said, 11. Thank you. They spoke, then, of neutral things. The weather. A book she had left in the schoolroom that he had, it emerged, found and read. He asked her at one point whether she had ever kept ledgers. She said she had, for her father, from the age of 13 until his death. He said in a voice so quiet it was almost internal, "Ah." He did not pursue it. She did not offer more, but she filed the "ah" the way she had filed the crescent scar. Lady Marwood, unable to bear the murmuring any longer, addressed the Duke down the length of the table with the airy voice she had used to slice at Verity earlier. "Ashcombe, you must tell us the joke. The whole room is dying of it." The Duke, without looking at her, said, "There is no joke, Aunt. Miss Hollisway and I are speaking of my son." The silence that followed was of a particular flavor. It was not the shocked silence of a scandal. It was the silence of a woman who had staked a great deal on the boy's continued silence, being a matter no one at Ashcombe was permitted to raise, and who had just heard him raise it at his own supper table, to a plus-size governess in a turned gray silk. Lady Marwood's color changed. It was a very small change, but Verity, who saw such things, saw it. "Thomas is well, I hope," Lady Marwood said, and the voice was fractionally too high. "He is beginning to be," said the Duke. He did not offer more. He returned his attention to Verity. But now, understand, Verity had been given a piece of information she had not been holding a minute before. She had believed until this moment that Thomas's silence was pure grief, and no other thing. She had believed, in short, the story the house told about itself. She saw now, in Lady Marwood's color, that the story was incomplete. Something had been done to that boy, or said to that boy, and Lady Marwood knew what it was. She did not react. She lifted her wine-glass. She said to the Duke, at the low pitch that had become their private register, "Your aunt is fond of your son." "My aunt is fond of my son's inheritance." "Ah," said Verity, and it was the same "ah" he had given her earlier, and he heard it, and something moved at the corner of his mouth again. The game course came. She ate slowly. She was thinking. Her hand went, without her permission, to the ribbon at her waist, and she felt the folded edge of the boy's letter, and she remembered. She said, low, "Your Grace, before we go to the library, there is a thing I promised a child I would put into your hand. I did not know when I promised that I would be at your right hand at supper. If I give it to you now, no one will see. If I wait, I must find you privately, which is a worse thing." He did not turn his head. He said, "Under the cloth. My hand is on my knee. Yours also." She moved her hand very slightly, and his came under the linen to meet hers, and she pressed the folded letter into his palm, and his fingers closed on it, and for one instant only, her hand was inside his. His palm was warm and dry, and the crescent scar was rough against her thumb, and she thought, quite clearly and without permission, "Oh." And then the letter was gone, and his hand was gone, and she was eating game as though nothing at all had passed between them. He did not read the letter. Not there. He set his hand back on the cloth and continued to look at his aunt, and no one who had not been watching for it would have known that anything at all had changed. But Verity, who had been watching, saw that his color had gone up under the jaw, and that his breathing had shifted, and she understood that she had done something to him she had not intended. She said, at last, and only to him, "You said 2 reasons. Your son was the first. Is the letter the second?" "The letter is a third," he said, without looking at her, "which I did not know existed until this moment. The second, Miss Hollisway, is that a man has come into this house on a false errand, and I do not yet know what he wants, and I need someone in this house who is not of it to help me find out." "Who?" "Mr. Silas Fenmore. He is seated, as you noticed, in your former place. He has letters of introduction from my late wife's brother. He has been my guest for 9 days. He has been very charming to everyone. He has been particularly charming to my niece, who is 11. Verity's fingers stilled on her fork. 11, she said. 11. And her fortune. 15,000 at her majority, held in trust, trustees who can be spoken to. She thought. She ate. She did not look at the man at the head of the second table who had, she remembered now, been extraordinarily attentive to a nervous 11-year-old at Thursday's tea, and had brought her a book of pressed flowers, and had asked her, twice, whether she preferred the country to the town. She said, "You want me to watch him. I want you to do what you already do. I want you to notice. I have watched him 9 days, and he has never once given me anything to hold. He is a careful man. You are, I am beginning to believe, a more careful woman." "That is not," said Verity, "a compliment I have ever been paid." "It wasn't a compliment," said the Duke. "It was a statement of fact. Will you help me?" She was going to say yes. She knew she was going to say yes. She wanted, however, to be sure of the terms, because she had lived a life in which the terms had been left to other people, and it had not gone well for her. She said, "Before I answer, I will tell you my conditions, Your Grace, and you will hear them and agree to them, or you will not, and if not, I will finish my supper and go quietly to my room." "Go on." 1. If I am to do this thing, I will not be treated in this house as I was treated tonight. You have made a scene to move me up a table. Very well. But tomorrow I will not be sent back down, and I will not be dressed as a governess and paraded as a duchess when it suits you, and returned to the schoolroom when it does not. Either I am governess to Sophia, and I stay in that room, or I am a person you have engaged for your confidence, and I am treated accordingly. Choose. The second. 2. I will not spy on a child. I will watch Mr. Fenmore. I will not read Sophia's letters. I will not question her about him. I will not lie to her. If I find that she loves him, I will tell you so, and then it is your problem, and it will not be mine. Agreed. 3. Your son. I will not be given to him as a project. I will keep leaving books. If he speaks to me, I will speak back. I will not be marched into that schoolroom by his father and introduced as anything at all. He must come to me if he comes. Agreed. 4. When this is done, when Mr. Fenmore is gone or unmasked or married to your niece, whichever it is, you will write me a reference in your own hand, and I will leave, and you will not stop me. The pause here was longer than the others. I hear you, he said. That is not agreement. I hear you. I will write the reference. I will not stop you. But I will ask you, when the time comes, whether you wish to be stopped. That is not the same as stopping you. Is that acceptable? She thought about that. She thought about it for the space of 3 heartbeats. She had never, in 18 years, been offered so much as the courtesy of being asked. That is acceptable, she said. Then you have your conditions, Miss Hollisway, and I have mine, and mine are these: that you do not lie to me, not about my son, not about my niece, Not about my aunt. Not about anything. If you cannot tell me a thing, you will tell me you cannot tell it. You will not tell me an untruth. Agreed. That in the matter of Mr. Fenmore, you tell no one else what we are about. Not Mrs. Pargeter, not my steward. If you must have an ally, you come to me first. Agreed. That when I ask something of you which you find beyond the limit of what you are willing to give, you say so plainly. I do not want to have to guess at you. Agreed. Then, Miss Hollisway, we are bound together for rather longer than 2 hours. She looked at him then, properly, for the first time. He was looking back. She did not know what her own face was doing, but she felt, for a strange bare second, entirely visible. Not in the sense of being watched by the room, which she had lived with all her life, but in the sense of being seen, one person, by one other person, with nothing in between. He had gray eyes, tired, and a scar on his hand, and a son who had asked for jam, and he was looking at her as though she were, of all improbable things, a piece of good news. She looked away. She had to. Her hand was not perfectly steady. She said very lightly, 2 hours then, and then the library. And then the library. The rest of supper passed in a slow blur of small talk. Lady Marwood tried, twice, to draw the Duke into her end of the table, and twice he answered civilly and returned to Verity. Mr. Fenmore, at the head of the second table, laughed too easily and too often, and told a long story about a horse. Verity watched him without watching him. He had, she saw, a very good coat, better than any 9-day guest's coat had any business being, and rings on 2 fingers of his right hand that were not, quite, the rings of an English gentleman. At the far end, a small movement caught her eye. A door in the wainscoting, a servant's door, opened a crack. A pale, small face was there for 1 instant, and gone. Thomas! He had come to look. She did not turn her head. She lifted her water-glass 1/4 of an inch, as if in greeting to no one, and set it down. The door closed. When the ladies withdrew, Verity went with them, though she felt Lady Marwood's eye on her every step, and though she knew she had earned herself, in a single supper, an enemy for life. She did not care. She had earned worse for less. She sat in the drawing-room with a cup of tea she did not drink, and answered pleasantly the questions of a kind old cousin, who wanted, without knowing why, to be on her side, and she thought, all the while, of a small warm palm, and a folded letter, and a man who had waited to speak until his aunt could hear him name his son. At 11 she went to the library. Mrs. Pargeter was already there, with her mending in her lap and the fire built up, seated in a straight chair beside the door with the exact expression of a woman who had been asked to sit in a library at 11 with a governess and a duke, and had decided, without needing to be told, that whatever passed here would pass through her and no further. Verity greeted her by name. Mrs. Pargeter inclined her head. The Duke stood by the fire, and he had, Verity noticed, changed neither his coat nor his manner, but the tightness under the jaw was gone. He said, "Mrs. Pargeter, thank you. Miss Hollisway, sit, please." She sat. He drew the letter from inside his coat. "I have read it," he said. "The child who gave it to you is Betsy Combe, whose sister Nan is in service in this house. Nan is 17. Nan is with child. The father is Mr. Fenmore. The letter is from Nan, asking me, not as a servant asks a master, but as a woman asks the only man in the house who might do anything, to send Mr. Fenmore away before he ruins her more publicly. She is prepared, she says, to leave if I require it. She only asks that he go first." Verity said nothing for a moment. Then she said quietly, "Betsy is 7. She is. She promised her sister she would put it in your hand. She did. And it was your hand it came through. Miss Hollisway, this is what my house has been for 4 years. My son does not speak. My aunt sets my seating to insult my governess. A stranger charms my niece over pressed flowers. and a girl of 17 writes a letter of the last resort and hands it to a child, because there is no adult in this house she trusts to reach me. I have not been unkind. I have been absent. It is a distinction I have made too much of." The fire popped. Mrs. Pargeter's needle did not slow. Verity said, "Nan is not to be sent away." "No." "And Sophia is not to be told this." "No, not by us. If it must be told her, it will be told her by me, at the right hour, and gently." "And Mr. Fenmore?" "Mr. Fenmore leaves this house within the week." "On what grounds?" "On any grounds." He looked at her. "That is where I need you. I could send him off tomorrow on the letter alone, but the letter belongs to Nan, and I will not use her name to do it. I want more. I want the thing about him that is not the girl. Because a man who does this to a maid in a house he is guesting in is not doing only this. He wants my niece's £15,000. He wants something else besides. Find me one true thing about him that has nothing to do with Nan, and I will have him out of my house without her name ever spoken in it." Verity thought. She thought of the rings and the coat and the story about the horse, which had been, she was now certain, a story he had told before. She said, "Give me 3 days." 3 days, he said. "And in the meantime, you will remove from the schoolroom in the west wing to the governess' suite on the first floor, adjacent to Sophia's rooms and near mine, so that I can find you when I need you, and you can find me when you need me. Mrs. Pargeter has arranged it." Mrs. Pargeter inclined her head again. She had apparently been arranging things. Verity said, "Very well." He crossed to her. He did not sit. He stood before her, and he put out his hand, and she looked at it, and did not, at first, understand what it was for. Then she did. She put hers into his. He closed his over it, not the covert clasp of under the cloth, but a straight, honest handshake, and he said, "Miss Hollisway, I am obliged." She said, "Your Grace, you are welcome." "Alistair," he said, "in this room, in front of Mrs. Pargeter, who is the discretion of this house made flesh, I would rather not be your Grace to the one person in it who tells me the truth." She could feel her color up. She said, "That is not appropriate." "You are correct. It is not, nevertheless." Mrs. Pargeter, without lifting her eyes from her mending, said, "I have heard nothing, Your Grace." Verity laughed. It surprised her. She had not laughed in that house yet, and the sound of her own laugh was strange to her. The Duke did not laugh, but the tightness at his mouth eased, and he let go of her hand, and he said, 10 o'clock tomorrow. My study. Come, and Miss Hollisway. Thank you for the letter. I would rather have had it from your hand than any other in this house." She went to bed at midnight in a room she had not seen before that day, and she lay awake in it, and she thought about the count of the candles, and the crescent scar, and the boy in the doorway, and the words she had said at supper without meaning to. "We're bound together for 2 hours." She had said it as a warning. He had taken it as a promise. And here was the thing she could not, in the dark, quite tell herself. She had, in the saying of it, meant it as something in between. The next 3 days went by like a piece of music she was writing while she played it. She watched Mr. Fenmore. She was very good at watching Mr. Fenmore, because Mr. Fenmore had already dismissed her at supper as a person who mattered, a plus-size spinster promoted above her station by the whim of a widowed duke. And Mr. Fenmore, having dismissed her, ceased to guard himself against her. He talked in front of her the way he would have talked in front of a piece of furniture. She learned that he had come from Bristol before London, and from Dublin before Bristol, and that he had told 2 different guests, 2 different names for his mother, and that he wrote letters twice a week to someone in Liverpool, whose name he would not say. She learned that the rings on his fingers had been a set of 3, once, and that the third had been sold, and that its absence still bothered him because he touched the empty finger when he thought he was unwatched. She learned that he had, in 9 days, been to the estate office twice on invented errands and had lingered, both times, over the same ledger. Not the accounts ledger, the rent roll, the book that listed, by name and holding, every tenant on the estate and every widow with a life interest, and every ward with a claim. She wrote none of this down. She kept it in her head, where she kept most things. On the second day, in the schoolroom, Sophia, who was a clever, hungry, motherless child of 11 who had not been given nearly enough to think about, said over an untouched Latin exercise, "Miss Hollisway, do you think Mr. Fenmore is very handsome?" Verity said, "I think Mr. Fenmore is very well dressed. That is not the same." Sophia frowned. She was a frowner. It was one of her most promising qualities. "He asked me yesterday about my mother's people, about my mother's brother." "Did he?" "He said my uncle in Liverpool is a fine man, and that he has met him." Verity did not, by any movement of her face, betray that a piece had just fallen into place, but her hand tightened on her pencil. "Sophia," she said, "your uncle in Liverpool. Tell me about him." "He is my mother's brother. He is a merchant. He wrote to Uncle Ashcombe last year that he wished to be my guardian instead. Uncle Ashcombe was very cross about it. I heard him." "Ah," said Verity, "are you cross with me for talking of it?" "No, my dear. I am the opposite of cross. Do your Latin now. We will speak of Liverpool later." That evening she went to the Duke's study at 10 and closed the door behind her, Mrs. Pargeter having been informed and being, again, in a chair outside. And she said, without preamble, "Mr. Fenmore is your late wife's brother's man, not her brother's friend, his agent. He is here to make a case that Sophia is unhappy in your care and would prefer her Liverpool uncle. When he leaves, he will leave with a letter Sophia has written him, or a story she has told him, or a bruise she has taken that she has told him you gave her, and he will lay it before the chancery. He is not courting Sophia. He is collecting her." The Duke was very still. He said, "You are certain?" "I am certain enough that I would say it to a magistrate." "Say it now." "He touches the empty ring finger. He wrote to Liverpool on Tuesday. He has been to the rent roll twice. He told Sophia yesterday that her Liverpool uncle is a fine man, and that he has met him, which is a slip. Fenmore's earlier story to you was that he had letters of introduction through your late wife's brother, which is a very different thing from being his man. He is not charming her. He is grooming her testimony. Alistair, he is going to file a petition in her name." She had not meant to use it. It came out. He did not react to it. Or rather, he reacted only in that he closed his eyes for one breath and opened them again. He said, "How long have I?" "Until Thursday. He wrote to Liverpool on Tuesday. The reply, if it comes Friday. If he has instructions to move, he moves Saturday. If he has instructions to hold, he holds and waits for Sophia's next letter to make a bruise of. Then we move Thursday." "Yes." "Miss Hollisway." "Yes." "You have," he said, in a voice that had gone quite low, "just saved my niece." She did not answer. She could not, for the moment, quite trust her voice. She had done such work before, in other houses. She had saved other people's children. No one had ever, before, thanked her aloud. He said, "Verity." She looked up. "I did not know your first name until this evening. Mrs. Pargeter told me. I asked. Forgive me for using it. I will not, if you would rather I not." "Use it," she said. "In this room." "Verity, thank you." Between that Wednesday night and Thursday afternoon, a number of quiet things happened. The Duke's steward, an elderly man named Halpin, who had been at Ashcombe 40 years and could not be surprised by anything anymore, was set to gathering, from correspondence, a full record of Mr. Fenmore's arrivals and departures at the estate office. The Duke's own solicitor was sent for from town by fast horse. Nan Coombe was sent quietly to Mrs. Pargeter's own sister at a farm 10 miles off, with a purse and a promise that her situation and her place were both secure. Sophia was told nothing. Thomas was told nothing. Thomas came, however, on Thursday morning to Verity, and this, of everything that happened that week, was the thing she remembered longest. She was in the schoolroom marking Sophia's Latin, badly done on purpose, because Sophia had not wanted to attend to it, and she heard the door open behind her, and she did not turn. She had learned, in 3 weeks, not to turn. He came and stood at her elbow. He was small for 8, and thin, and had his father's gray eyes and none of his father's guardedness. He had the wooden horse in his hand. He said, in a voice so quiet she almost lost it, "You left me a book about a horse." "I did." "The horse in the book is called Firebrand." "He is." "My horse," said Thomas, and held up the wooden one, which was old and much held, "has no name." Verity set her pencil down. She said, "That is because you have not told me his name yet." "He does not have one." "Then he is waiting for it." Thomas thought about this. He was, she saw, a child who thought as she thought, slowly, and once. He said, "My mother named my rocking horse. Before. She named it Barnabas." "Barnabas is a fine name." "She would have named this one." "Perhaps," said Verity. "She still can, if you listen for what she would have chosen." He looked at her. He said, "They told me I was too loud. When she was sick, they said I made her worse, that she could not rest because of me. So I stopped. And then she died anyway. I stopped, and she still died." Verity did not move. She had known, from the color of Lady Marwood's face at supper, that a thing like this was in the house. She had not known its shape. She said gently, "Who told you that, Thomas?" "Aunt Marwood." "Ah. Was it true?" She said, "No. It was a cruel thing to tell a boy, and it was not true. Your mother's illness was in her lungs. It was not in your voice. There is nothing you could have said or sung or shouted that would have made her worse or better. It was an illness. It killed her. It did not need your help, and it did not need your silence." Thomas was quiet for a very long time. Then he said, "I have been quiet a long time." "You have. Do you think she minded?" "I think," said Verity, "that a mother wants to hear her child's voice more than anything else in the world. I think she has been listening for you. I think, wherever she is, she has been listening." He put the wooden horse on the table. He said, "His name is Ashley. That was what she called me. Ashley, not Thomas." "Then his name is Ashley." He nodded. He did not cry. He said, "I would like a piece of bread and jam." She rang for it. He ate it in the schoolroom, in the chair opposite her, in silence, but the silence now was the silence of a child eating, not the silence of a child gone. When he was done, he said, "Miss Hollisway, are you going to stay?" She said, "I have said I would leave when a certain matter is finished. Please stay." She did not answer at once. She said, "Thomas, that is a thing between me and your father. But I will tell you this. I am not going anywhere before I have heard you sing your hymn. That, I promise you, is not tomorrow's business. But it is not, never." He looked at her a long moment. Then he slid off the chair, and he took his wooden horse, and he said at the door, "His name is Ashley," as though setting it down for the record, and he went. She sat for a long time with her pencil on the desk, and her hands folded in her lap. Aunt Marwood had told an 8-year-old boy that his voice had killed his mother. Aunt Marwood, who had drawn up a seating plan to insult a governess. Aunt Marwood, who had gone the wrong color at supper when the boy was mentioned. Aunt Marwood, who was Lady Marwood in her own right, and the Duke's aunt by marriage, and who had had a great many years of running of the house of Ashcombe, as though the child were a piece of the furniture and the child's silence a convenience. Verity got up. She went to find the Duke. She told him. He did not say anything for a full minute. He stood at the window of his study with his back to her, and his hands folded behind him, and his shoulders, she saw, were not perfectly still. He said at length, "I have been an appalling father." "You have been a grieving father." "That is not different enough. Verity," he turned. "If she said that to him, she said it to him because she believed the boy was not going to speak again. And she believed the boy was not going to speak again, because if the boy did not speak, he was going to be judged. Do you understand? He was going to be judged incapable of the succession, and if he was judged incapable, then the estate would come to her son, my cousin, whom she has been steering to it these 4 years. Verity said, "Yes, that is what I have been thinking. She has been in my house 4 years, working my son's silence into a claim." "Yes. And Fenmore, and Liverpool. Someone here has been telling Liverpool that the boy will not speak." "Yes." He sat down. He sat down in the chair as though he had been struck. He put his hand over his eyes. He said, "It is her. She has written to Liverpool. She has told Sophia's uncle that the house is in a state, that the boy is broken, that the girl is neglected. She has invited Fenmore. She has arranged the seating. She has, yes. And I have sat in this house, and I have paid no attention. You are paying attention now." He took his hand away from his eyes. He said, "Verity, I do not know how to thank you." "Do not thank me yet. Thursday first. Get Fenmore out, then Marwood." "Yes." She went to the door. At the door she turned. She said without meaning to, and in a voice more her own than she was accustomed to, "Alistair, when Thomas sings his hymn, be in the room." He said, "I will." Thursday came. The Duke's solicitor arrived at noon. At 3 o'clock, Mr. Fenmore was invited into the study, in the presence of the solicitor, of Halpin the steward, and of the Duke, and was informed, quietly, precisely, with a set of dates and letters laid on the desk, that his correspondence with Liverpool was known, that his prior activities in Bristol and Dublin had been inquired into, that the estate office's rent roll was not a public document and had been consulted by him without leave, and that he would be on the 4 o'clock coach to town. His trunk was already packed. It had been packed by Mrs. Pargeter that morning. He tried, for perhaps 30 seconds, to bluster. Then he looked at the Duke, and at the solicitor, and at Halpin, and he understood that he was, in the plainest sense, finished in this house, and in this county, and probably in this profession, and he closed his mouth and picked up his hat and went. Nan's name was never mentioned. That had been the promise. Lady Marwood was more difficult. She was family. She could not be put on a coach. She was, however, spoken to. The Duke spoke to her that evening in the drawing-room, and he did not raise his voice, and Verity was not there. This was not her business, and he had not asked her to be. But Mrs. Pargeter, who had a way of being present at doors, reported afterwards that his Grace had said to her ladyship, very quietly, that he had learned what she had said to his son in the spring of the year his wife had died, and that she would leave Ashcombe in the morning, and that she would not return, and that she would receive her allowance for life on condition that she never again spoke to, or of any child in his household, and that if she attempted, through any correspondence or agent, to influence the guardianship of his niece or the succession of his son, the allowance would end, and the correspondence would be laid before the courts. Her ladyship, Mrs. Pargeter reported, had gone very white, and had said nothing at all. She had left before breakfast. And here is a thing that the Duke did not know Verity knew, but which she did know because Mrs. Pargeter had told her, and which she kept in her heart for a long time afterwards. He had said to his aunt, at the end, in the same quiet voice, "You told a boy of 6 that his voice killed his mother. There is no room in my house for a woman who could say that to a child. There has not been since the moment you said it. I only did not know. The house, in the days after, was strange. It was quieter, but the quiet was different. Not the counted candle quiet of a house that had given up, but the quiet of a house holding its breath, because something was about to be different. Thomas came to the schoolroom every morning. He ate bread and jam. He read. He named a second horse, a real one in the stables, Firebrand, and rode it badly at a walk with his father beside him. He did not sing. Then, on a Sunday of high wind and rain, when the household was gathered for evening prayers in the great hall, as was the custom at Ashcombe, and the chaplain had led them through the responses, and the hymn had been given out, a hymn Verity had not chosen, and had not known was in the book, but which was, she saw at once from the Duke's face, the hymn. Thomas, standing beside his father with his hand in his father's hand, sang. He sang the first line alone. His voice was thin and high, and a little rough with disuse, and he sang the words wrong in one place, and he sang them anyway. And after the first line, the chaplain came in beneath him, and after the second, the household came in above and below, and by the third, Verity was crying, she who had lost the habit at 17. And the Duke was crying, not moving, not covering his face, only letting the tears come as though they were a rain he had earned, and his hand around his son's hand was so tight, the knuckles were white, and the crescent scar was pale as bone. Thomas sang to the end. When it was done, he looked up at his father and said, quite clearly, "That was Mamma's." "Yes," said the Duke. "She heard me." "Yes." Verity, in her place among the household, 3 rows back, put her hand over her mouth and kept it there until she could be sure of herself again. That night, in the library, after Mrs. Pargeter had brought the tea and gone with a little more haste than usual, she was, Verity suspected, going to cry in her own room, being a woman of feeling underneath the fence post. The Duke stood at the fire and did not turn around. He said, "Verity." "Yes." "You said, at supper, the first supper, our first supper, that you were bound to me for 2 hours." "I did." "It is longer than 2 hours now." "Yes." "I do not want it to end." She did not answer. She was not, for the moment, certain her voice would come. He turned. He said, "I am not asking as your employer. I am not asking as a duke, and I am not asking as a widower who needs a mother for his son. My son does not need a mother from me. He has chosen his own, and he has done it without my help. I am asking, Verity, look at me. I am asking as a man who has, for 4 years, counted his own candles, and who has watched you walk into his house in a turned gray silk and light every one of them without noticing you were doing it. I am asking whether you would consider, not tomorrow, not this week, I am asking whether you would consider allowing me to court you. Properly, in a form your name can bear. I do not deserve an answer tonight. I am aware of that. I am asking because if I do not ask, I will lose my nerve, and I have lost my nerve for 4 years, and I would rather not lose it again." Verity said, "Alistair?" "Yes." "Do not," she said, "say this if it is only gratitude. Do not say it because I found your Fenmore and unmasked your aunt and made your son sing. Do not say it because you are grateful. I have been thanked for saving other people's children before. I will not be married for it." He came and knelt in his own library before her chair, and he took her hand, and he said, "It is not gratitude. Verity, look at me. It is not gratitude. I noticed you the first evening. I noticed you when you came into the schoolroom and left a book on the sill for a boy who had not looked at anyone in 14 months. I noticed you when you spoke to the girl on the stairs and told her she looked well. I noticed you at supper before I moved you, and I moved you because I could not bear one more course watching Marwood's plan of you across a table. I have noticed you every hour since. My gratitude is a separate thing, and it is enormous, and I will tell you about it later. Right now I am telling you that I want you at my supper, and in my library, and in my life, for reasons that are mine, and have nothing to do with what you have done for me. Do you understand?" She said, "Yes." "Yes, what?" "Yes, you may court me. Yes, I understand. Yes." He put his forehead against her hand. He stayed there. She lifted her other hand and set it, very gently, on the back of his head, and she felt the small tremor of a man who had held himself upright for 4 years finally, in the safety of the room and of her hand, permitting himself not to. She said softly, "You are a good man, Alistair. You have been a tired man and a grieving man and an absent man, but under all of that you have been a good man. I have watched you. I noticed, too." "Verity." "Yes." "You are, in every particular, beautiful." She laughed, wetly, because she could not help it. She said, "You do not have to." "I am not being kind. I am stating a fact, Miss Hollisway. Verity. It is a fact. I have looked, and it is a fact. Do not argue with me about it. You may argue with me about a great many things, and I will lose most of them cheerfully, but not this one." She did not argue with him about it. They were married in the spring, in the chapel at Ashcombe, quietly, with the household present, and Thomas standing at his father's side and Sophia standing at Verity's, and Mrs. Pargeter in the front row, crying without changing expression, and Halpin the steward giving the bride away because there was no one else to do it, and he had asked. Verity wore not gray but a soft, dark blue, and it had not been turned, and it fit her exactly as she was, and the Duke, seeing her at the chapel door, forgot for one moment to breathe. Thomas sang the hymn. He sang it whole this time, and true, and Sophia, who had, over the winter, been told everything she needed to be told and